Well, good morning, Stowmarket Citadel.
Good morning and happy 135th birthday to the Stowmarket Citadel.
It's really hard to believe, but 135 years ago, the Salvation Army began its good work here in Stowmarket. Now, later in today's meeting, Adi Moy, he'll be sharing with us a little bit of the history of the Stowmarket Corps. But for those of you also who enjoy watching the self-denial videos, stay tuned to the end of the meeting.
And on that note, as far as self-denial is concerned, if you'd like to make a donation to this year's self-denial project, you can do it one of two ways. You can donate online, or you can put some money in one of those envelopes that you should be receiving soon, or that you may have already received. And just a quick note, don't forget to put your name on the envelope.
Sure.
This morning, I'm going to read to you from the book of Lamentations, chapter 3, verses 22 to 23, to get the meeting started today. It's from the New International Version, and it says this: "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness."
I love that song that goes along with that, and I love that verse because it says, "His mercies are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness." I know that as a Salvationist here in Stowmarket today, we can look back for the last 135 years and thank God for his faithfulness to our Corps and for the people of Stowmarket. Let us stand and let us sing today. Great is thy faithfulness.
Hello. A lot has changed since our 134th Corps anniversary. We are living in dramatic, historic times. None of us have ever lived through anything like it. Last year was a different world to what it is now. So imagine what life was like when the army commenced its warfare in Stowmarket way back in 1886. It truly was a different world then. Yet the Salvationists of 1886 and onwards had many more obstacles to overcome of their own, including 2 world wars and a skeleton army. The Corps folk were the ones that made the history of our Corps so vibrant. Officers came and went at a rapid rate in the early days, but that was the way of things back then. So it was the people of Stowmarket and surrounding areas that were first curious of this new religion. And I want to share with you a few stories that I have gleaned from Salvation Army publications published way back in 1899, just 13 years after warfare commenced. Stowmarket abounds in quaint little towns, but at least from the Salvation Army standpoint, few are more interesting than Old Stowmarket. Thursday is market day, and then the town appears wide awake and up to date. So here we have documentary evidence that Stowmarket has once been up to date, but that was 1899. But at the other times, the streets, houses and inhabitants seem to be enjoying a dignified, many centuries old repose. Hurry and worry are not characteristics of the place. Extreme poverty is almost unknown in Stowmarket because for the willing there is always work in the gun cotton, malt and stay factories. But in and about amongst the 4,400 souls who inhabit this parish stalks the grim, wily drink devil. And home-brewed beer has tripped up many a well-meaning lad and lassie in Suffolk. Well, you can tell from the language there, the author was not from this part of the world. Lad and lassie, it'll be more like boy and gal. Stowmarket soldiers turned up well at all meetings, late Saturday night as well as early Sunday morning, and, in spite of the long distances which many of them lived from the centre of the town, after the open air they marched to the barracks for a short meeting. So accustomed are they to the amusing signboards of the many old taverns that they now pass by even without noticing them. One inn is called the Staff of Life, and displays a picture representing beef, bread, cheese and beer, but appearances indicate the visitors are regaled chiefly upon the last. Now the Staff of Life actually closed way back in 1911 and is now a domestic property, number 26 Stow Upland Street. The barracks is long, low roofed and has a brick floor. All make themselves at home around the glowing stove and a bright, helpful hour follows. Sunday morning the open air at the end of a long walk, but 30 soldiers, a creditable percentage of the total number on the roll, are present. One aged sergeant comes hobbling along with the aid of a stick, his pockets crammed with young soldiers and social gazettes and a bundle of war cries under his arm. Another soldier arrives on a bicycle from a distant village. A bandsman steps across the road to speak a warning to a backslidden acquaintance, a showily dressed young man who pretends to be deeply absorbed in watching a boy carrying on his head a board bearing some family's dinner on its way to a neighbouring bakehouse. However, the young man promises to attend the holiness meeting, and at its close he volunteers to the penitent form, weeping bitterly. The Corn Hall is used by the army on Sundays, and so large have the audience has recently been that an increase of chairs has been necessary. Captain Light's meetings are bright, while at the same time bristling with pointed truths. The Moy family are pillars of the Stowmarket band. For Harry Moy, his twin sons, and his brother make up 1/4 of its members. They live 3 miles from Stowmarket, and yet the Corps has few more reliable soldiers. Even Mrs. Moy and her 3 younger children think nothing of the long walk compared with missing meetings. The first Sunday evening Harry Moy endeavoured to visit the Salvationists, the crowd was too big to allow of his getting near the door, so he adjourned to a pub. But even there, all were talking of the new religion. A fortnight later, April the 4th, 1886, he was saved, and within 2 weeks, 6 of his relatives followed his example. The article goes on to end with a little post note. 11 years ago, and remember this was written in 1899, the Stowmarket town crier would wantonly ring his bell close to the Salvationists, maliciously hoping to thus break up their meetings. Today, every passer-by has a friendly word for the wearers of poke bonnets and Guernseys. Let's bring back those Guernseys. Many tried to disrupt the Salvation Army's work in Stowmarket, and apparently it got quite rough at times. So much so that members of what is now the United Reformed Church formed a human cordon as the Salvationists marched by to prevent them being attacked by the Skeleton Army. One of the founding members of the Skeleton Army was a certain Jonathan Nunn, and this was written about him sometime afterwards. Bandmaster Nunn and his wife, who is a junior soldier treasurer, are model Salvationists and have been earnest workers in the Corps since its beginning. Their children are lively juniors. By trade, Jonathan Nunn is a bootmaker, and he has worked in Stowmarket since he was 19. God has prospered him, and he is now a master, and one of his employees is also one of his bandsmen. For fun, he joined the Skeleton Band when it organised, but he knew that the Salvationists were right, and that he was wrong. Once his mates predicted that he would be saved in a fortnight, and that before Christmas. The latter prophecy came true, although he always sat in the meetings with his cap in his pocket, prepared to bolt if a fisher approached him. Now apparently fishers were people who would go around the congregation and try and pull people out from the congregation and take them to the penitent form. From all accounts, the trick was not to make eye contact. Brother Nunn became a bandsman directly after becoming a soldier, and he has been the bandmaster 9 years. There is also some more information about Harry Moy. Band Sergeant Moy, while living at Harleston Green, a village some 4 miles from Stowmarket, heard of the Salvation Army being at Colchester and Ipswich, wondered what sort of folks they were, and felt anxious to see them. Accordingly, he took an early opportunity of attending a meeting in a barn at Woolpit, but could not get in for the crowd. The next Sunday he tried again and succeeded. The following Sunday night, April 4th, 1886, he was saved. His brother Fred came to the cross a few days after, and both have been in the Corps ever since. Fred is still a bandsman. Sister Mrs. Moy is a blood and fire Salvationist. After 8.5 years in the band, our comrade has lately been appointed band sergeant. His twin sons are bandsmen also, and one of them is a Corps cadet. Brother Moy's qualities as a good and reliable soldier will find healthful exercise in his new position of responsibility and trust. He was known by all as Harry Moy, but his actual name was Henry. His first wife died, the mother of the twin boys mentioned in the story, and he married Martha Prentice. Harry's third son, and Harry and Martha's first son, but Harry's third son was John Moy. John Moy's third son was Clifford Moy. I'm Clifford Moy's third son, and guess what? I've got 3 sons, the third being Max. The army commenced warfare in Stowmarket in February 1886, and Harry Moy was saved on Sunday the 4th of April 1886. The Moys have been in Stowmarket Corps ever since. Poor old Harry died aged just 62 of tuberculosis of the knee and heart failure. The cause? A farmer for most of his life. He was kicked in the knee by a cow and the wound became infected. I'm not sure whether that outcome would be possible nowadays with modern medicine. But back in those days, that's what happened. If he had stayed in that pub way back in 1886 where so many of his mates did, who knows if the Moy family would ever have become Salvationists. But he, like so many of the old soldiers throughout the years, were made of strong stuff, and their strong, unwavering belief and love of God has proved an enduring example to not just the Moy family. I've often wondered how such a small town as Stowmarket has such a large core throughout the years. But you can trace a great many of our current church members to ancestors who, just like the Moys, stayed steadfast and true. Families like the Girlings, Dykes, and at least 3 different families named Baker. My parents have told me of the many wonderful people that influenced them by showing Christian love. The stories of people like Kenny and Peggy Baker, Fred and May Harvey, Arthur and Ada Cobbold, Les and Nellie Hayward, Bill and Evie Mount. And I will miss out so many more whose love made this core so strong, and may their influence continue to exist. Bringing it up to date, well, relatively, I want to reminisce about some people who have left a lasting impression on me. I remember a wonderful old Salvationist, Eva Brock. She always sat at the back of the hall wearing her bonnet and extra long black skirt. I was very young at the time, but I seem to remember her having a long pointed nose, pointed chin, small pair of glasses and long grey wiry hair made up in a bun. I never saw her with a black cat, but she was so frightening to look at. I think you really needed to be 18 to look at her. So what was her job in the Salvation Army at Stowmarket? They put her in the primary with all the small, frightened children. But in the primary was the Pied Piper of Stowmarket, Julia Girling, a lady of gypsy origin. Looking back at Auntie Julie, as we used to call her, she was as mad as a bag of frogs. Such a wonderful soul, and those of us of a certain age will never look at a kazoo without thinking of her. Then there was my Uncle Stan, who didn't hum or whistle but ditted his way around the band room. Did it. Always remembering him for doing that, as he looked after the books so dutifully as a band librarian. Then there was Gilbert Last, a road sweeper with lightning quick reflexes when it was time for a testimony, always first up. Gilbert always said he was glad he had a testimony to give. For some, Gilbert's speech was difficult to understand, but once you got to understand him, his faith was so touching, simple and uncomplicated. He always mentioned that he lived with his broer. He couldn't say brother. And he talked about Selby in Yorkshire, where he got into bad company, but was then saved and rolled, rather than enrolled, under the flag. Bless him. You know, when Gilbert got up to testify, you always knew what he was going to say. But I shall never ever forget the reverence in which he was listened to. There was the colour sergeant, Ernie Moles, who came to Stockport Heaton Norris with the band, and was at a billet which gave him a bed for the night, but was not able to give him Sunday lunch. So Ernie was going to join Paul Ditt Moy and Clive Woosher Hayward at their billet for lunch. A billet which housed a rather boisterous and energetic little boy. Now, you couldn't get 2 more cheeky chappies than Ditt and Woosher. And they told this boisterous, energetic young lad that he'd better behave himself at lunchtime because, they told him, Ernie was a former boxing champion. Well, for those of you that didn't know Ernie, it was pretty obvious just by looking at his long nose that it had never received anything as much as a punch, and he was certainly no Masher Moles. But that didn't stop the young lad shadow boxing poor old Ernie as he arrived for lunch. Finally, 3 other people, 2 thankfully still with us and 1 sadly not, that really influenced me as a lad and young man. First, there was my young people's Sergeant Major Graham Leonard. He even said when he retired as YPSM that several of his grey hairs had my name on them. A wonderful man, and Lowestoft Citadel's gain was certainly Stowmarket's loss. Then in my teenage years, the teacher that was Trevor Harvey left an indelible mark on me, a real man of God. Remember how earlier on I told the story of Captain Amy Light, who knew how to make people bristle with pointed truths? That was way back in 1899. Well, Trevor was more diplomatic than that, but none less potent in his teachings. My last hero was Steve Ambrose. He nurtured me in my latter teenage years, encouraged me, as you would expect of a descendant of the Dykes family. A Corps anniversary is the right time to look back and remember the times and the people that shaped our Corps throughout the last 135 years. So I challenge myself to be steadfast and true, and I encourage others to make history at Stowmarket Corps in the future. COVID-19 has allowed the devil to attack us with a full frontal attack of apathy. We can get used to not going to the army. We can't go at the moment anyway. But if we don't return when it's okay to do so, we will be missing out on the encouragement, love and friendship of Stowmarket Salvationists that have proven to be such a worthwhile thing to have for the last 135 years. I hope to see you soon.
William Booth, an old man in his 75th year, yet had the courage and determination to inaugurate an entirely new method of campaigning. In the autumn of 1904, he used a motor car to tour from one end of the kingdom to the other. During this first motor campaign, a distance of 1,250 miles was covered. Imagine what this meant in these primitive cars for a man in his 70s. There were some people who disapproved of these methods, but on the whole, the imagination of the world was struck with sympathy and approval that this very old man should adopt the latest invention of science at the end of his life's work. enthusiasm was great. In town or country, large numbers gathered to listen to him. For by now, William Booth, who had faced great opposition for so long, had in his old age achieved worldwide popularity. His work was recognized as the work of one honestly inspired by love of humanity. Campaigning by motor car soon became one of the General's established methods. In vehicles like these, he journeyed throughout England, Scotland, and Wales.
William Booth was criticized for using a motor car to travel as he preached. Now, many people just simply said that that's not how we do it. Some said that using a motor car was way too expensive or extravagant. And some even went as far as to think that it was the work of the devil. Now, regardless of thoughts, William Booth created a spectacle, and people came out to see him arrive in a motor car. Now, on one of his stops during one of his motor campaigns, well, he stopped right here in Stowmarket. He arrived with much fanfare, and he took time to preach in the town square, and then he preached at the Congregational Church. The Congregational Church was actually just across a small street from the Stowmarket Parish Church, which we know as St. Peter's and St. Mary's. The building that was across the street as the Congregational Church is now the John Peel Center. The heritage that we have here in Stowmarket is absolutely staggering. I'm so humbled to be a part of the ongoing story of the Salvation Army here in Stowmarket. Many of the officers and soldiers and friends of the Salvation Army have led with passion, perseverance, and dedication, giving to us the Army heritage that we have today. Just like Adi sharing about those who have had an impact on his life throughout the years, many of you who have been members for years might have your own list of those who have cheered you on. And I know that some of you listening now are new to the Army, and some new since the pandemic has begun. And you're beginning your journey with us. And we are cheering you on. In my imagination, I can see the many that have gone before us. I can imagine them cheering us on and encouraging us to engage others that they may be saved, especially now moving in to the next 135 years. Kind of reminds me of a scripture, Hebrews 12, 1-3. It's called the Hall of Faith, and the reason it's called that is because it lists all of the founding fathers of the church. I'm not just talking about church, but Old Testament people. And it talks about how they were people of faith. And then it says this: therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. When William Booth preached at the Congregational Church in Stowmarket, the ticket suggests that he preached on the Salvation Army, past, present, and future. Now I wonder what his vision of the future entailed. Now, one thing's for sure, he was passionate, and he was passionate for the souls of men, women, boys, and girls. He was about winning them by any means possible, even using a motor car. Now, as we head out of this pandemic we're in and into the next 135 years, what new way can we win souls for Christ? At the beginning of this pandemic, many have scoffed at the church decided to use the internet and things like videos and Zoom meetings. And to be honest, I was not really a lover of Zoom meetings myself, and I'm still not convinced I am. But this just might be the new motor car for the Salvation Army. Since the beginning of this pandemic, we have used the internet to provide Zoom coffee chats, Zoom prayer meetings. We now have 5 Zoom small group Bible study that was meant to be in person, but they've moved to Zoom, and maybe afterwards we can move into person. But we have 5, and there's one more starting up. And let us know if you want to join one. We also have an e-newsletter that does come through the internet to your inbox, and we have a WhatsApp prayer chain. The songsters have had regular Zoom meetings and keep connected through Messenger. The band, they keep in contact through a band app. Now, for those of you who don't have internet, and we have a telephone church meeting every Sunday. All you need is a telephone, and we'll provide the number, and you can chat, and we can all chat together, and we provide a service. Now, while things are different, I can say this: the Salvation Army is still marching along. As an officer and leader in the Salvation Army, I know that we are marching on. Again, it may look different. We don't know how it's going to be coming out of this pandemic. But I promise you this as your leader: where Jesus leads, I'll follow on. I'll stand for Christ alone. This is our call. This is our challenge. Please stand with me. Please follow on with me into this next 135 years, and let's together stand for Christ alone and reach those who need reached. May God bless you today.
Hello and welcome to the third of our films for this year's Self-Denial Appeal. This week I'll be talking to Richard Bradbury. Richard and his wife Heidi have been serving in Bangladesh for the last 2.5 years. They're there with their 2 children, and they work at the headquarters in Dhaka, the country's capital. Bangladesh has about 100 officers and about 1,000 soldiers. The country's population is increasing, especially in the cities. Dhaka has twice the population of London, but is 5 times more densely populated. These images were filmed by a team from the Canada and Bermuda territory for their self-denial appeal last year. When I caught up with Richard, he was not in Bangladesh, but quarantining in Denmark, which is Heidi's homeland, as the family took a well-earned Christmas break. Well, it's really great to be chatting with you, Richard. Can you just tell us what's it been like for you in Bangladesh?
Like many places, it's been a very challenging time. It wasn't just a healthcare issue, it was more an economic issue. So many people are on daily wages, and so to not have any income during that time had some really serious implications. And when you live in very crowded conditions, whether it be in a house that you're sharing with your extended family, or when you're living on top of each other in a slum area, then transmission is much quicker, and it's much harder to isolate things.
There was a post you made about seeing some of your international colleagues flying out. Literally, you could see their planes going over where you lived, and you could almost just see that could have been you, but you stayed with the people. How difficult was that decision to stay?
In some ways, it was not very difficult. I think for us, we felt, well, actually, we have this tremendous privilege of living in another culture, and we can't only do that during the good times. That actually, if we're truly believing that this is our calling, this is where we're supposed to be, then that has to be during the challenging times as well. We can't just take the good bits. So yes, there were struggles in our minds, particularly at the start around the lack of the healthcare, and that was a risk. There's no doubt about it. And that's why many people went. But for us, I guess at that point, we just had to believe that our faith was stronger than our fears at that point. And we just wanted to stay and journey along with our colleagues.
How is church life continuing in Bangladesh?
During the initial lockdown stages, we had to, like many places around the world, we had to close the churches, but we don't have the benefit of Zoom or Skype or these issues. It's often said that places like Bangladesh, the Salvation Army is not for the poor. The Salvation Army is also the poor, So many of our soldiers live in poverty, but our officers did a remarkable job just keeping everybody connected, and that was how we kept going until we were able to gather together as a church.
Yeah. Perhaps in the last few years, but certainly this year, I guess people have been thinking about what is resilience. Is that what you're saying? Is that something you've really seen in the officers and Salvationists in Bangladesh?
The Bangladeshi people are tremendously resilient, and the officers reflect that in their responses. And so we weren't just dealing with the response for COVID. We have dengue fever. We had a response for cyclone where we were helping people to rebuild their houses. They'd lost their house completely. A number of our halls and quarters were literally just blown away at the same time as we're trying to deal with the fallout from COVID as well. It was the locals that really stepped up in the response. So we were able to coordinate things, but actually the majority of the work was done by the local officers, the Salvation Army officers on the ground. And they did an amazing job. They went out often without concern for their own safety and did all kinds of things. And then we also have a number of clinics, and we were able to keep those open. I pay real tribute to the staff of those clinics that just kept soldiering on.
Yeah.
And I mean, another thing that I would say is that actually during this time, we've also had our self-denial appeal as well. And I'm always keen to stress that the International Salvation Army self-denial appeal is one that everybody gets to contribute in. And okay, we get more from that whole pot, but we still have the privilege of being part of that. And for many people here, it's a real act of self-denial. So that also emphasizes this idea that we stand together as Salvationists and Christians in solidarity, and this togetherness and connectedness that we have.
Well, if you can send the Salvationists of Bangladesh just our love and our admiration and acknowledgement of our brotherhood and sisterhood with them.
Thank you. And we are also grateful for the support that's been given to us, the financial support, yes, but also, the compassionate support and the concern that's been given to us as well.
Thanks, Richard. Speak to you another time.
Yeah.
Next week, I'll be talking to Melinda Boone in the Philippines.